Secretary Hobbs, welcome to Undivided.
It's good to be here.
Yeah, busy week. So I want to get right to it with a few things that have been happening in the news. The ballot drop box arsons. Do you know, is the FBI any closer to identifying who did that?
Uh, you know, I don't know. I know they've dedicated a lot of resources to it. It's very big on their priority list. We can't let this act of domestic terrorism go unanswered. Luckily, there was some footage of it, and if anybody, if anyone's listening to this show and watching, hey, if you have any hints, clues, whatever, please send that to the Clark County Sheriff's Department or the FBI.
Yeah, and I'm sure that you're in contact with them, and there might be some things that they've shared with you that you can't share with us. Totally understandable, totally fine. I think one of my concerns that the FBI and law enforcement has expressed is that, this is someone who might try it again. And now we're down to the wire. So I have a question just theoretically. Obviously, we hope it doesn't happen. But if a situation like that were to occur now, with just like 48 hours, less than 48 hours, and ballots were destroyed, what would happen if then the 8 p.m. deadline passed and somebody's ballot that had been turned in was destroyed?
Well, Brandy, that's what keeps me up at night is that scenario, because that scenario could result in the total loss of people's votes. This is horrible to say, but it was fortunate that it happened earlier, right? We don't want it to happen at all, but the fact that it happened earlier, that we were able to ramp up, reach out to the community out there so they could do a replacement ballot. We are taking a whole bunch of precautions. That's why there's 24/7 observation through the Clark County Auditor, Greg Kimsey. Greg, Republican, me, a Democrat, working together to try to ensure these elections are transparent, secure, and accessible. I think you heard on the news about the National Guard is on alert, on standby. I know the State Patrol is increased patrols. Obviously, the local law enforcement down there are doing increased patrols. And Brady, I don't know if you remember the report that was part of this, but this person actually put a device on a Dropbox a couple weeks earlier.
Yeah.
And some of that raised our concerns back then, and just trying to do the planning, like, well, what happens if this person continues?
So there is no process by which someone would be able to cure their ballot if the deadline has passed. If it's destroyed, their vote does not count.
Yeah, if it's destroyed, unless that, I guess you can go through a court, and then there's a judicial process of that, but there's no system in place to recover a ballot that's turned to complete ash.
That's fascinating. Why is that? Because if there's like an issue with a
Mhm.
signature, you have an opportunity to cure your signature. Is it just that if the ballot is ash, either you couldn't identify the voter or they'd be able to change their votes, or why is that not part of the
Right. We
law?
we wouldn't be able to know, if it turned to ash, we wouldn't even know if they even voted,
Huh.
And so now we're talking about legislation for the next, next session coming up. Do we make a standard, like this is the minimum standard of a drop box? It must be several inches thick in terms of, steel or whatever metal. It must have an extinguisher that can put out this type of fire. We need to talk about maybe you put in a scanner system. And again, this is just we're just throwing thoughts out there, right? This is the ideas, right? Yeah,
Right.
putting a scanner in there. If you put a ballot in there, it says, oh, Bob Smith just put his ballot in here, so we know Bob Smith put the ballot in there. Uh,
Gotcha.
so we're thinking about different ways how we can combat it. But it just sucks that we even got to talk about this.
Well,
That someone went out of their way to do this.
it does, but I think this, and we'll talk about, I am not
Mhm.
one of the people who believes that we should return to in-person voting. I think you see across the country, even in states where there's in-person voting, voter ID laws, there are still complaints and concerns about, so I think people will always find a way. Now, that doesn't mean I don't have concerns with our system, and this is one of them, though, right? Because you have to acknowledge that within mail-in voting, and we'll talk about what's happening in Whitman County, with mail-in voting the way it is, there are more opportunities down the line for something to happen to your ballot. Is that not true?
Well, Brandi, I mean, the other, it could be true with polling too. I mean, you're talking to someone that served in Kosovo and Iraq, where they did have polling centers, and those were targets of opportunity. And the hard thing too is across the country, it is hard to get election workers. It's just so hard to do that. I can't imagine if we start doing, multiple polling places, how we'd be able to do that, because people just they don't want to do it. It's hard.
Yeah, and I'm not saying go back to that. Again, I like
Yeah,
filling
yeah,
out my
no,
ballot at my kitchen counter,
yeah.
but this raises the concern, and then also the hundreds of ballots for Whitman County that just poof vanished, and I don't know if we even know where they are yet. I mean, it does add credibility to the concerns of a chain of custody issue, does it not?
It's absolutely upsetting when you have the U.S. Postal Service kind of sitting on stuff when they shouldn't. We not happy with DeJoy at all. You might recall that there was U.S. postal boxes that were sitting in there that they didn't clear out, that where they couldn't get into because they were broken or busted or whatever. That was horrible, and luckily they fixed that. But the good news is in this state is you have the ability to track, right? So the people in Whitman where it's like, hey, I didn't get a ballot, you can go online, like, well, looks like I didn't get a ballot and I didn't vote it. So I'm going to go print out my ballot, or I'm going to contact the county auditor and get one issued to me. Not convenient, obviously, but it would help if the U.S. Postal Service was, a little bit up to speed here. I mean, typically they are. I mean, 99% of the time they are. But in the case of Whitman County, I don't know what happened there. But the good news is those in Whitman County can vote, and I understand they are voting.
So at this juncture, we don't know where those ballots are, correct?
Well, they could have been. I don't know at this particular moment. There was a meeting that I couldn't go to, so I don't know. But more than happy to follow up with that.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like they vanished, right? So is there going to be a duplicate ballot situation? There was also this instance and I think part of going through these is, when people have concerns, addressing them head on, I think is the best way to assuage concerns they have over the sanctity of our elections. There's a woman who was on King 5 News the other day. She got, what was it, 16 ballots with different names delivered to her apartment. Have you looked into what happened there?
Yes, and I applaud her because I'm glad she found those and took them to the King County elections, because what happened was, she's a renter, right? So new place, she gets there, she gets her mailbox, looks in there. Oh my God, I've got like 7 or 8 ballots. It wasn't 16 at first. So she took them, went to the Postal Service, and says, "Hey, I got these ballots. These people aren't living here." Now this is why I get slightly upset with the Postal Service. Like, instead of taking those to King County elections, because clearly the people don't live there, they mailed them back to her. So that's why the King 5 News said 16, but really it's not 16. It's just the same ones mailed back. And here's the thing: the people that lived there before, they're legitimate voters, but they didn't do a change of address, right? And you're not put on inactive voter roll status until after your second federal election if you don't vote there, and that's just law. And then there was another, right? Those people were there for about a year, and then a year before that, there was another tenants that were living there. So she had 2 tenants worth, past tenants worth of ballots, and unfortunately, they didn't get to the right people because those folks did not do a change of address. But she did the right thing. So if you see something like that, take them to your local county auditor elections.
Yeah, and I think all of that just lends to those concerns of, again, these things happened early. She did the right thing. She did something with them. Somebody else, may have not done the same thing in that scenario. You've had some knocks against USPS, but at the same time, we rely heavily on them to get people's ballots to where they're going. Is that a good idea?
Right. Well, here's the thing. I look at the news today and I see long lines in Chicago, in Pennsylvania and Georgia. It doesn't matter, red, blue state, swing state that has poll only voting or early voting. I mean, early voting, they were like 3 hours long. We can't go back to that. It's just not going to work.
I agree.
And what we got to do is, and I recognize this, is that we got to constantly try to improve, right? If we see a fault, let's try to fix it. If we see an opportunity to do better, let's do better. Yeah, it's not 100%, but in terms of the, multiple millions of people that vote in our elections, it's pretty good. It's a pretty good system that we have.
And I know we're just about out of time here. Just 2 quick things, I guess, for people who are concerned. There's this can fall into one of two categories, but Governor Inslee, as you alluded to earlier, I mean, you have a long history in the National Guard. The governor's coming out and saying we're getting the National Guard on standby. There are some far left groups in Seattle that have said that they're going to riot regardless of the outcome of the presidential election, whether it's Kamala Harris or Donald Trump. They don't care. They think that both are like, a vote for genocide in Palestine, as they put it on their flyers. So how concerned are you as the Secretary of State that on election night there's going to be unrest?
Not on election night. I could see a scenario in which, now look, I hope it doesn't happen, right? I'm hoping people will be will be calm, but it's the next day, right? It's those that didn't win and the people that won't accept that loss, right? That's the problem. And then going all the way up to certification is the issue. And I just want to make this clear because I am a member of the National Guard. Like, we are the very last line of defense. Like, we're not going to be involved unless local law enforcement absolutely needs us. And I want the viewers and your folks to know that these National Guard members that I serve with, my brothers and sisters, man, we're just like you. We're your neighbors. We're citizen soldiers. We don't want to be out there. We'd like to be with our families. And so, it's unfortunate that that's going to happen. But, the Guard is prepared either way, right? If it's those on the far left or those on the far right, we're prepared to protect life, property, and allow people access to elections. So
Yeah.
I just want folks to know that.
Yeah. Last question for you. Save the best one for last. One of the things that I've respected about you is your willingness to call balls and strikes. I think that's pretty rare in politics. You called a ball when Bob Ferguson asked you to change the order on the ballots in the summer months. It is a distinct possibility he's going to be our next governor. That would mean that, you're working together in the same building down there in Olympia. What if he asks you to do something like that again in his capacity as governor?
Right. Probably wouldn't. If it's illegal or I can't do it, I'm not going to do it. I know Brandi, Governor Inslee and I didn't quite get along on a lot of things, and but we have a professional relationship. Sometimes we can think past politics. I'm hoping that was just a moment where he was very angry and wasn't aware of the RCW. But I'm prepared to work with anyone. I'll work with Bob. I'll work with Reichert. Because as you know, Brandi, sometimes I'm a radical moderate. That's my cat. Sorry.
Nicole's spotted the cat. Yeah.
But I'm prepared. I'm unafraid. I usually get flame from both the far left and far right. I'm known as you might remember the Roadkill Caucus.
Roadkill Caucus, yeah.
So I am used to the flaming. That I'm just going to do the right thing. So
yeah. What's the cat's name?
Omochi.
Omochi?
Yep, Omochi.
Oh, okay. That's an interesting. I like it. Well, we appreciate your time. I know we're way over. You're a busy man today. I do just want to end with a thank you to you and your team for what you did with the initiatives. I don't think people quite appreciate the amount of work that went into that around the clock. And I know from Brian Haywood and Let's Go Washington, he's only spoke, very well of what your team did and how professional you were. And this was a really unprecedented situation. So from those of us who supported those initiatives, I do thank you and your team for that.
Thank you very much. We have a great team. Thank you.
All right. Happy Election Day to you tomorrow.
Yes, indeed.